I never set out to overhear my own offspring. Yet that's exactly what unfolded one muted Sunday afternoon on Zoom when polite chatter, "How are you, Dad?" slid like ice into something far more mercenary. "We need to settle who controls the wallet." That single phrase paralyzed me. Not the stitched leather you tuck in your pocket. No, the wallet, the digital vault I had been quietly cultivating for nearly 10 years. Born of a chance encounter with a young neighbor outside a grocery store who spoke of Bitcoin like prophecy. What began as idle curiosity had swollen into a hoard, large enough to bankroll decades of food, a comfortable twilight, or, in their vision, a suburban palace with polished floors and a blue-tiled pool. And just like that, I ceased being Dad. I was reduced to a cipher, a key, a vault. If you've ever felt more like a ledger than a living parent, you'll know why I must carve this story into words. And before I plunge deeper, if such tales awaken something in you, subscribe, leave a trace in the comments, share whether you too have been overlooked in your own family. Because what followed wasn't conversation. It was the opening volley of war. The screen fractured into faces. My son, Adam, leaning into a headset too clumsy for his head, playing the part of Silicon Valley strategist. My daughter, Emily, haloed by her ring light, whispering impatience to her unseen husband. "Dad, you look well," she chimed, with the brittle brightness of a nurse checking vitals, not a daughter checking on her father. "How was your week?" I longed to speak of the neighbor's mutt uprooting my tulips or the magazine recipe I had butchered. But Adam interjected, eyes sharp. "Hey, Em, did you open that article I sent you about power of attorney?" They believed they were muted. They weren't. My gut twisted. You see, I didn't come of age in a world of contracts written in code. I was raised among lumber, diesel, and steel. My hands calloused from work that kept roofs over heads, tuition paid, weddings hosted I could scarcely afford. Every penny funneled into them. And now, through the laptop's glow, I realized they weren't recalling sacrifice. They were calculating, adding columns, weighing the digits of my life against the square footage of their imagined future. "Dad, what's the password you use for your account?" Adam asked suddenly, feigning filial concern. I shifted. "Which account?" I asked, though the answer hung in the air already. "You know, your wallet," Emily added, smile too sweet, too deliberate. I almost laughed, whispering as though it cloaked the intent. I told them I'd look it up later, feigning frailty. They nodded, relief flickering like a spark, relief that maybe the old man was slipping, that they were closing in. But I wasn't as fragile as they hoped. I had been waiting for this very moment. Age teaches you paradox. Love is sincere and yet disappointing. Children can say Dad in one breath and burden in the next. That's the puzzle of bloodlines. You never quite know which face you'll see. So I muted myself and simply listened. "He doesn't even remember his login," Emily whispered. "That's why we must act now before it unravels," Adam muttered. My life, reduced to a spreadsheet, assets to be managed. I leaned back in my cracked recliner, the same one where my wife, God rest her, once curled with novels. Her photograph, still bright on the mantel, caught my eye, and I heard her voice from long ago. "Promise me you won't let kindness become your undoing." I had promised, and I would keep it. So I smiled, told them I'd check my important papers, and clicked the call shut with a wave. Inside, my mind thundered. They believed they were so near to conquest, but the treasure they coveted was already moving, untouchable to their grasping hands. That night I drew out a weathered notebook, its pages lined with passwords, recovery keys, backups, my scrawl shaky but clear. I had not been preparing for hackers or markets. I had been bracing for this, my children's betrayal. They fancied themselves cunning. They had no idea how stubborn a man becomes when he has built a life brick by brick, dollar by dollar. As the house fell silent, I began sketching a plan, not vengeance exactly, but remembrance. To remind them that a father is not a balance sheet. A father is shoulders once strong enough to carry them, hands that worked overtime so they might eat, a man who stood guard when others faltered. This was never about money. It was about dignity. Morning came with sunlight spearing through the blinds. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee black, toast crisping in the air. With steady fingers, I opened my laptop. An email draft blinked on the screen. To Veteran Scholarship Fund. Amount $750,000. Memo for tomorrow's children from yesterday's man. I didn't press send. Not yet. Timing mattered. The next family Zoom was scheduled for Friday. And that, I decided, would be the day my children learned who their father truly was. The Zoom chime sounded again that Friday night, reverberating through the quiet of my living room like a summons. The laptop flickered awake, its green eye glowing steady, a tiny guardian that bore witness. I lowered myself into Ellen's recliner. There's gravity in ritual. Sit in the same chair, keep the same posture, and the illusion of constancy becomes its own armor. Let them believe the stage hadn't shifted. Dad. Emily beamed, her tone sugar-coated. You look sharp tonight. I caught my reflection in the corner thumbnail, collared shirt buttoned neat, hair brushed, glasses polished until they glinted. I had chosen carefully. No wrinkles, no stains, just enough refinement to remind them I wasn't unraveling. But that wasn't what they sought. They were prospectors scanning for fissures. So, Adam leaned in, voice almost casual though his eyes betrayed him, darting, restless like tickers scrolling across a trading floor. Did you manage to find those papers we mentioned? Yes, I said, deliberate, letting the silence stretch taut. I came across a few things. Their faces brightened too quickly, too eagerly. Perfect, Adam pressed. Why don't you share your screen? We'll walk you through it, make sure everything's squared away. Walk me through it. The words rattled around my skull, hollow as loose change in a dryer. Walk me through my own life. I shook my head. Not sure I know how to share my screen. A lie, of course. I knew it was just a button, but sometimes feigned ignorance is a sharper blade than knowledge. Oh, don't worry. Emily chirped, voice pitched the way you'd coax a toddler tying his laces. Just click the green button, it's simple. Another time, I said, voice steady. I'm a bit tired tonight. The disappointment flared across their faces before they smothered it, mask slipping if only for a second. In that sliver I understood. They weren't safeguarding me, they were accelerating the takeover. You learn as a parent to hear the undercurrent beneath words, to distinguish a genuine "how are you" from a lure baited with intent. That night they cast their lines recklessly. So, Dad, Emily's voice softened but her eyes sharpened. Do you still use that notebook, the one near your desk, for passwords? I blinked slowly, feigning fog. Notebook, I don't quite recall. She leaned toward the camera, as if she could reach through the glass and rifle through my drawers herself. That's okay, Adam cut in quickly. We can help you organize it, keep things secure. So many scams these days. Secure, organized, safe. Fine words polished until they gleamed, but each one carried the same toxin, control. Ellen's gaze held me again from the photograph on the mantel. I heard her in the silence, don't let kindness be your undoing, so I nodded mildly. You may be right, I'll consider it, but I already knew. My life wasn't about to be distilled into 12 words for their keeping. The conversation meandered, yoga classes, business meetings, Phoenix weather. I nodded, smiled, but watched the way their eyes kept circling back to me, probing, measuring. Was I slipping? Was the fortress weakening? At one point, Adam asked, Dad, remember last Christmas when we set up that ledger for you? I squinted, pretending to grope for memory. Ledger? You mean like an accounting book? His sigh dragged heavy across the call. No, Dad, the USB for your wallet. Oh, I murmured, soft, puzzled. Did we do that? Emily's voice wavered. Yes, Dad, you don't remember. I shrugged. Must have slipped my mind. And there it was, the spark of arrogance. They thought the walls were crumbling, thought the vault door was rusting on its hinges. I let silence spool out the way an angler lets the line sink. Then I tugged it back just a little. You know, said slowly, maybe I should write things down for safekeeping. Their eyes lit, hunger flashing bright. That's a good idea, Adam jumped. We could even make a digital copy, keep it in the cloud. The cloud, I nearly laughed aloud. They wanted me to float my life into a space where their hands could snatch it. Perhaps, I murmured. I'll think about it. The bait was swallowed whole. Emily tilted her head, her voice all concern. Dad, do you ever feel overwhelmed? Like maybe it's too much to manage alone? Wouldn't it be easier if someone else took care of the details? There it was, the blade hidden in velvet. I leaned back, exhaled slow. Sometimes I admitted, but not tonight. Her smile faltered, and inside I smiled. Because in that moment I wasn't the doddering man fumbling with technology. I was the card sharp watching amateurs bluff themselves blind. After an hour, fatigue or frustration dragged them down. "We'll figure it out soon," Adam said, cheer stretching thin. "Of course," I replied, calm as stone. "Take care." The screen dimmed to black. Silence returned, broken only by the hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock. I sat still, watching the faint reflection of my own face in the laptop's glass. Then turning to Ellen's picture, I whispered, "They think they're close, but they've never been further." Later that night, I opened the battered notebook again. Seed phrases lined the page, orderly and intact. My finger traced the ink like one touches scripture. For the first time in years, I felt not diminished, but formidable. Because my children were playing a game they thought they had invented, and they hadn't the faintest idea that the rules had always been mine. By the third chime of Zoom's hollow cheer, I had almost steeled myself for the ritual. That sound, once harmless, now echoed like a summons from a judge's gavel. This time I joined early, shifting the camera so the sun's slatted glow through the blinds softened the weary etchings on my face. Ellen would have teased, "Vain, Roy." Yet this wasn't vanity, it was theater. I needed them to see a man composed, not crumbling. Their rectangles flickered alive. Adam nodded, distracted as always by something outside his frame. Emily's smile blazed a shade too bright. Then, without the grace of a greeting, she leaned in. "Dad, have you thought about getting someone in more regular help, just so we know you're okay?" Help. The syllable landed bitter, metallic, tasting of pity polished into calculation. I cleared my throat. "I do just fine," but she pressed harder. "Last week you nearly left the burner on. That frightened me." Truth. I had left it burning for a minute, no longer. The faint smoke had caught me, shame curling tighter than the haze itself. But now, bent into evidence for incompetence, it cut deeper than flame. "I caught it," I replied, steady. "No harm." Adam entered, tone weighted, somber. "Dad, we worry. What if you're alone when something goes wrong? These houses are brittle. One mistake could cost everything." Everything, not me. The timbers, the shingles, the bank ledger. I reclined into Ellen's chair, letting their words settle like dust motes. They thought they sowed concern, but beneath the soil I heard justification sprouting. Control never begins with a demand. It begins with pity, and there my first fracture. Emily's glance darted sideways. A muffled whisper, sharp as glass, pushed the nursing home angle. Her husband's voice, my jaw locked. I gave a thin smile. "You sound like you're drafting a plan." Her laugh came brittle, too loud. "Oh, Dad, no, we only want you safe." But the curtain had slipped even for a second. I no longer saw children. I saw tacticians, investors circling inheritance dressed as concern. I thought of Ellen and me, counting bills at this table, working Saturdays so Emily's tuition was paid, co-signing Adam's first loan. Sacrifice had been my vocabulary. Gratitude should have been theirs. Instead, they spoke of safety, liability, facilities. I studied their faces, familiar outlines, foreign spirits, and it struck me cold. They weren't simply testing. They were rehearsing the story they'd recite when the time came to exile me from this house. "You know," Adam leaned forward, "there's a place near Boulder. Good staff, mountain views, you'd enjoy it." My grip crushed the armrest until wood groaned under leather. "That's so?" I asked, quiet. "Yes," Emily chimed. "It would ease the burden for us. You wouldn't need to worry." I wanted to roar, "I'm not the one worrying, you are." Instead, "I'll think about it." 3 words hollow to them, yet iron to me, because I was thinking, just not in ways they could fathom. After the call ended, silence reclaimed the room. The refrigerator's hum, the clock's tick, mundane music steadier than their painted concern. I glanced at Ellen's portrait. "They believe they're shielding me," I whispered, "but all they guard is themselves." The house answered with a creak, siding with me. That night I paced each room deliberately. The kitchen carried lemon oil from polished cabinets. The dining table bore scars of feasts past. The bay window, Ellen's shrine, caught the moonlight like silver poured on glass. Every corner stored a memory, each threatened to be erased, renovated, resold. I paused at the shelf, brushing spines of old novels. Ellen's slips of paper still marked her favorites, breadcrumbs of her spirit. And I knew this wasn't property, it was identity. Remove me from here and they rewrote my life. That I could not yield. Morning came. Oatmeal coffee, then the laptop. The blinking cursor stared from an unfinished email to the Veterans Fund. Not yet. Timing mattered. Instead, I began another file, notes, strategies, timestamps of their careful words. A ledger of truths, not for court but for clarity. Proof of who I remained and of what they schemed to erase. The crack wasn't just in their charade. It was in their hubris. They underestimated me, mistook a man fumbling with passwords for a man bereft of memory, mistook age for weakness. But time had honed me like stone polishes steel, and patience sharpened with preparation is a blade of its own. By week's end, I had stashed wallet keys in 3 strongholds, one with the lawyer, one with the bank, one in a deposit box under another name. If they thought me careless, they'd learn otherwise. Still, I wore the mask, nodded on Zoom, let them fish their lines. Because sometimes, the surest way to catch a thief is to let him believe the door already swings wide. The dawn after that phone call, my fingers refused the cold glow of the laptop. Instead, I wandered through the home, our home, as though tracing lifelines etched across my own hand. Every corner carried Ellen, not in the hollowed sense of specters, but in the raw, immovable spirit of a woman who had poured herself into timber, mortar, and glass. Step by step, recollections pressed in, sharp as splinters. First, the kitchen. The granite counter, marbled in gray and streaked with sun-gold veins, still shimmered when light struck. We hadn't the luxury of hired builders, so I carved those slabs myself, 3 weekends of cutting, grinding, sanding. Ellen stood by with a pitcher of lemonade, her belly round with Emily, while I muttered at corners that defied precision. Her laughter lingers even now. "Roy, you'll manage it, you always do." That countertop was never just stone. It was faith, her faith that I could wrangle disorder into usefulness. In the living room, my gaze snagged on the burgundy sofa, its threads frayed but its spine unbroken. Emily had once hunched there with algebra, tongue caught between her teeth. Adam had transformed it into a fortress of pillows, swearing eternal dominion. That sofa was no mere seat, it was witness. A silent sentinel to the rise and fall of our family's heartbeat. Upstairs, I opened the closet. Ellen's dresses still dangled, pale blues and soft creams whispering of bygone Sundays. Faint perfume lingered, stubborn against 2 years of absence. My fingers brushed the sleeve of her church dress, and an old ache surged like tide against rib cage. Our lives had been stitched from sacrifice, double shifts, rattling cars, suppers of beans when tuition drained the coffers. I remembered Emily's plea for a dream wedding. I said 5,000. She wept. I hauled timber 6 months' worth of Saturdays, vertebrae screaming so she could twirl beneath chandeliers and roses. On that night, she pressed close and murmured, "Daddy, you're the best man alive." But gratitude has wings, promises dissolve. Back in the present, I perched on the bed's edge, tugging open an old shoebox. Inside, slips of proof, tuition fees, doctor's bills, mortgage notes. Evidence of unseen battles fought in silence. Every receipt was a scar. And now, to hear them speak of me as if I were ballast, as though the years of giving were loans demanding foreclosure. It cut deeper than any midnight shift ever did. The memory of that call echoed. Whispered talk of nursing homes, pity wrapped in silk, but pity nonetheless. Something inside me hardened. They confused sacrifice for fragility, mistook generosity for decrepitude. But I remembered what they'd forgotten. Those sacrifices forged not only this house but me, a man tempered to endure, to bend, and if cornered, to strike. That afternoon, I brewed coffee Ellen's way, dark, with cinnamon's quiet bite. I carried the cup to my study where her framed photograph waited. "Do you see this, Ellen?" I asked the glass. "Do you see what they're plotting?" Her eyes, captured forever in a 20-year-old smile, seemed to echo her last warning. "Do not let kindness undo you." So I began to write, not passwords, not accounts, not shallow notes. History, line after line. I etched the ledger, extra hours worked, debts erased, gifts granted. Not in numbers, but in years, muscle and marrow. Because one day when their polished tails cracked, I wanted something irrefutable, a chronicle, not of assets but of devotion already spent. As the ink bled across paper, I realized this wasn't mine alone. It belonged to every father dismissed as a wallet, every mother relegated to silence when deemed spent. This was my last offering, but this time not for them, for myself, for dignity, for justice. Dusk settled and silence pressed in. No television, only the steadfast tick of Ellen's grandfather clock. I sat amidst the walls she had filled with her presence and wondered, how long before whispers turned to commands and commands to eviction? But fear did not stir me, preparation did, and therein lay the fissure they had overlooked. For while they schemed about moving me out, I had already begun to move toward something hidden from their gaze. Toward what? I could not yet name it, but the idea of transmuting sacrifice into strategy steadied my hands like steel for the first time in years. I never set out to rebel. Men of my generation were sculpted differently, molded to endure, to provide, to keep the gears of life oiled without protest. Yet rebellion isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it wears a quieter mask, a withheld truth, a softened smile, an answer bent sideways. That week I did something I hadn't dared in years. I began keeping secrets. It started with a simple ring. Wednesday afternoon, the landline crackled. I didn't need to check the caller ID. Emily always called at lunch. "Hi, Dad," she chimed, her voice dipped in sugar. "Just thinking about you." I pictured her perched in some sleek glass office, scrolling her phone while her salad wilted untouched. She spoke of weather, baseball scores, coworkers' babies. Then, too casually to be coincidence, she slid the blade in. "By the way, Dad, maybe you should let us handle some of the paperwork. Bills, accounts. You wouldn't have to worry." I let a smile curl unseen. "Paperwork, oh, I hardly keep track of that anymore." Her silence bloomed with eagerness. "Really? Then maybe this weekend Jeremy and I could stop by, go through everything just to be safe." "That sounds fine," I answered smoothly. "Bring Jeremy along, he's good at that sort of thing." She bit the bait quickly. "Of course." When I hung up, my heart stayed calm but my mind sharpened. The circle was tightening. That night I climbed to the closet's top shelf and pulled down a metal box. Inside, Ellen's will, the deed, my private notes, the marrow of truth. I didn't read. I only held it heavy across my lap, anchoring me. Then I carried it to the garage, slipped it into an old cooler, and buried it behind stacks of rusted tools. If they went digging, they'd find only the husks of bills and junk mail. But not the core, not the truth. It was the first time I'd hidden anything from my own children. Oddly, it felt less like betrayal and more like survival. By Friday evening they arrived. Emily breezed in with a tote bag fat with binders, Jeremy trailing with his smug grin and a laptop hugged close. "Dad," she cried, hugging me with a cheerfulness rehearsed too well. "We brought dinner, Chinese takeout, once Ellen's favorite, though they hadn't remembered." We ate around the scarred dining table, Adam's old science project grooves still cut into its wood. They chatted idly, but I caught Jeremy's eyes flicking to the hall closet, the desk, the shelves. Calculating. After dinner, Emily opened her binder like a stage curtain. "So, Dad, we thought we'd help you organize a few things. It'll give you peace of mind." Jeremy leaned in. "And us too, you know, in case of emergencies." That word again, emergencies. I folded my hands. "That's thoughtful, but I'm not sure I remember where everything is." Jeremy smiled too thinly. "That's okay, we'll help you find it." For an hour they searched, scribbled notes, tugged at drawers. I played along, scattering expired statements and faded utility bills like crumbs. Emily exhaled sharply, waving a stack of envelopes. "Dad, this is chaos. What if something happened tomorrow? How would we know what to do?" Her voice trembled, not with concern for me, but with dread of delay. I shrugged. "Maybe you'd figure it out." Jeremy's jaw tightened. "That's not funny." "No," I said softly, "it isn't." When they left, their tote bag bulged with copies of nothing. Dead accounts, lapsed policies, receipts from groceries long eaten. They kissed my cheek, spoke of love, promised to help more. And as their car rolled away, I stood at the window, the true box safe in the garage. For the first time, I felt the hunter's stillness, not the quarry's fear. That night, I pulled Ellen's Bordeaux from the shelf, a bottle meant for celebration. Perhaps rebellion, however small, was worth uncorking. I sank into the recliner, glass in hand, and whispered to her photograph. They think they're winning, but tonight we've taken the first step. The house seemed to breathe with me, lighter, approving. That night I slept deep, unbroken. By morning I rose not as a man bending toward surrender, but as one braced to fight. Rebellion never begins with thunder. It starts in silences, in locked boxes, in smiles that don't quite stretch to the eyes. And once it stirs, it does not retreat. It grows, firmer, louder, inevitable. Mine had only just begun. Rebellion, I discovered, has a flavor. Not the fire of whiskey, nor the acrid sting of overbrewed coffee. It was gentler, elusive, like the faint sweetness clinging to the bottom of a teacup, only revealed when you drain it dry. After tucking that metal box away in the garage, I could taste it everywhere. The next morning, habit dragged me from bed before the sun crested. Years of early shifts had carved wakefulness into my bones, sky still bruised with violet as I poured coffee and opened my battered notebook. That was when the plan began to breathe. I didn't name it revenge, not then. Revenge belonged to novels, to whispered tales, not to an old father scrawling in half-light. No, what I sought was protection. A barrier to keep my life, my dignity, from being reduced to a column in their binders. So I began with a question: what do they want most? The answer came quick: access. Not to my laughter, not to my time, not even to my presence. They craved entry to the house, the accounts, the wallet. If access was their prize, then denial would be my blade. I cataloged every key in my possession, not just iron ones, but the invisible keys that unlocked meaning. The deed, the passwords, the digital wallet phrases. Ellen's jewelry still wrapped in its velvet box, sentimental yet beyond price. Each of these could be sealed, hidden, or shifted. Each a shield. In that silence I charted their new homes. By mid-morning, restlessness gripped me. I shrugged on my coat and drove into town. First stop, the bank. The same marble-floored branch Ellen and I had trusted for decades. Mrs. Alvarez, the manager, still remembered my children toddling at her desk, Ellen's laughter ringing behind them. "Mr. Hayes," she greeted warmly. "It's been some time. How are you holding up?" I smiled with steady eyes. Just felt it was time to reorganize a few things. Within an hour, I had a safe deposit box. Small, discreet, just enough space for documents and the flash drive that had slept inside the cooler. My hand did not tremble as I signed. When I stepped outside, the Colorado sun cut sharp and clean through the air. For the first time in months, my thoughts were as clear as the sky. The lawyer's office came next. Todd Fisher. Younger than me, older than Adam, with the kind of handshake that balanced caution and conviction. "Roy," he said, rising to greet me. "Been a while, you holding up?" "Better than most think," I replied. He laughed softly. That's usually the good kind of answer. We chatted briefly before I slid the folder across his polished desk. "I want my wishes beyond dispute," I said. "No cracks, no loopholes. If something happens, it must stand firm." Todd's brow tightened. "You want to revise the will? Update it, strengthen it, add protections against anyone with ideas." He didn't ask who, he didn't need to. His pen was already in motion. When I left, a weight had lifted, not because I trusted lawyers or laws entirely, but because I had taken a step. Small, quiet, but forward. Driving home, I passed the old elementary school. Emily had once soared from those swings, her hair wild in the wind, laughter slicing the air. I remembered pushing her higher, higher still. The thought struck me like cold water. Rebellion wasn't just defense. It was remembrance. A way to prove, even in absence, that a father is not a ledger. That evening, Adam called. "Hey, Dad, how was your day?" I let the silence breathe before answering. "Productive." "Oh yeah, what you do?" I smiled into the receiver. "Errands, just getting things in order." His paws sharpened. "What kind of errands?" The kind you'll know about someday, I said lightly. I could almost hear his jaw tighten. Dad, he said carefully, we only want to help. I know, I murmured, and I appreciate it, but I knew better. Help was simply another word for control. That night I roamed the house again, but this time with a soldier's eye. I took silent inventory, what to shift, what to stage, what to leave as bait. The grandfather clock, Ellen's gift, ticked like a metronome of memory. The bay window glowed in the moonlight. The sofa sagged, heavy with the imprint of children long grown. Every piece, I realized, could serve, as shield, as decoy, as trap. And slowly, the outlines of a strategy etched themselves clear. By week's end, the scaffolding stood, documents locked at the bank, the lawyer armed with an updated will, false trails planted in plain sight. I was no longer reacting, I was preparing, and in that readiness I felt power. That night I lay in bed staring at the empty half still claimed by Ellen's presence. They think I'm slipping, I whispered, but I'm sharper now than I've been in years. The silence answered, steady and sure. In that silence, rebellion shed its skin. It was no longer defense, it was strategy. I once imagined rebellion as a whisper, a hidden current moving beneath the surface, unseen, untouched, harmless in its secrecy. Yet rebellion has a way of shedding its disguise. Sooner or later, someone notices what's been quietly shifted, the void left where pieces once fit. That reckoning arrived on a Sunday. Emily's SUV was the first omen, its silver body catching the autumn sun as it coasted into the drive. A heartbeat later, Adam's sedan followed, the crunch of gravel beneath his tires like a slow drumbeat announcing judgment. 2 cars, 2 children, and in that instant I understood they had come as one. I opened the door before their knuckles could strike the bell. Dad, Emily exhaled, urgency lacing her voice as though she carried dire news. We need to talk. I stood aside, offering the threshold. Then step inside. They moved with the caution of hunters, eyes scanning the living room for traces of their quarry, the scattered files, the loose ends they had pawed through the week before. But the table, bare and clean, betrayed nothing. Emily perched on the sofa, her hand brushing nervously across the folds of her skirt. Adam remained rigid, arms crossed like a barricade. Dad, he began, the edge in his tone unmistakable, we noticed things missing. I tilted my head. Missing. The insurance paperwork, account statements, a few other files. They were in your desk last week, now they've vanished. I lifted my coffee mug, taking a deliberate sip. I cleared some clutter. Emily leaned forward, her brows drawn. Why? We were helping you sort through everything. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. Perhaps I preferred to do it myself. The silence that followed pressed in like heavy fog. Adam finally snapped it apart. You can't just move critical documents without telling us. What if something happened? I set my mug down with care. Something did happen. I remembered that I'm not incapacitated. The weight of those words landed harder than I'd meant, but I didn't retreat from them. Emily's face softened. We just want to be sure you're safe. And I thank you for that, I replied evenly. But I've navigated this life longer than either of you have breathed. I can endure a while more. Their glance met, wordless, yet filled with strategy forged over years of sibling alliance. Emily's voice dropped to a coaxing tone. Dad, we've spoken with a friend. She works in elder planning. She said it might be prudent to establish power of attorney now, just in case. No, I didn't shout. The single syllable carved the air like steel. Adam blinked, stiffening. You don't understand. I understand exactly, I cut in, my voice calm but sharp. And my answer stands. For the first time in weeks I saw cracks. Adam's jaw tensed, Emily's smile faltered, brittle at the edges. You're being obstinate, Adam muttered. I leaned forward, lowering my voice so it carried weight instead of volume. No, son, I'm being unequivocal. They tried soft appeals after that. Stories of concern, promises of simplifying life. Jeremy's name surfaced, tied to some scheme they thought he could draft, but the harder they pressed, the firmer I rooted myself. And in that resilience, suspicion flickered in their eyes. They sensed it. I wasn't unraveling. I was entrenching. When they left, Emily's hug clung longer than usual, her smile stiff as porcelain. Adam's goodbye was curt, his eyes still roaming the room as though secrets might slip from the walls. I watched their cars dissolve into the distance, the driveway quieting once more. Standing by the window, coffee cooling in my palm, a slow smile tugged at me. Their maneuver had unmasked itself. They weren't just probing anymore. They were accelerating, which meant it was time for me to accelerate too. That evening, I laid the notebook upon the kitchen table once more. The ledger of sacrifices beside a new column, next steps, change the locks, redirect the mail, establish a separate line, explore senior living on my terms, not theirs. Each line was a brick in a fortress, not a home but a defense. At dusk, I walked through Ellen's roses, their petals surrendering to the wind. Kneeling, I touched the soil and whispered, "They think the foundation belongs to them, but we built this together, not them." The breeze answered with a rustle as if affirming my vow. I rose, knees aching but resolute. Pain was an old companion, hardly an obstacle. If my children wanted a struggle for dominion, they would learn what it means to face a man forged by his own labor. That night I slept deeper than I had in months. The rebellion was no longer concealed, it breathed openly, standing tall, unashamed. But with defiance comes peril, for when people sense control slipping, they don't release it, they tighten their grip. And I knew my children were preparing to clench harder than ever. The first assault arrived cloaked in conversation. The second through their looming presence. By the third they brandished documents like weapons. It was a Wednesday, a brittle afternoon, when the chime echoed, not the casual ring of camaraderie but a deliberate summons. I opened the door to find Emily clutching a folder to her chest as though it were a shield. Adam loomed behind her, posture iron-straight, eyes unyielding. "Dad," Emily murmured, her voice sheathed in silk. "We need to talk, seriously." They ushered me to the dining table, our table. The one Ellen and I had saved scraps for, the same surface etched by crayons, bruised by science projects, consecrated with prayers. Now it was no longer furniture but a front line. Emily slid the folder across. Inside, pamphlets polished to a gleam. Cheerful elders on sunlit balconies, slogans dripping with promise, peace of mind, golden twilight. "Sunset Haven," Adam declared, tapping the page with military certainty. "Premier in the state, around-the-clock care, activities, doctors on hand, you'd be comfortable." That word, comfortable, as if I were a frayed armchair fit to be retired. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice steady but laced with granite. Emily's smile cracked. "Dad, it's not a prison, it's safety for you. Safety, always that. The velvet glove that hides a lock." Adam leaned in. "We consulted a lawyer, said it's best to put matters in writing. No disputes later." My chest tightened, ribs straining against betrayal. "A lawyer?" "Yes," he replied, resolute, "just preliminary." And in that instant I understood. Their whispers had grown teeth. This was no longer suggestion, it was siege. I rose, chair scraping against wood. "You plotted without me." Emily reached, hand trembling. "Dad, please don't turn this into a war. We're trying to." "To what?" My voice thundered at last. "Protect me, or secure the estate, the savings, the spoils of my so-called decline." The silence grew cavernous. Even the clock seemed ashamed to tick. Emily's eyes shimmered, grief or theater I couldn't discern. "We love you, that's all this is. Love," that battered word stretched thin enough to tear. I glanced at the pamphlet again. Strangers in polos, clutching playing cards under fluorescent lights. If that was their brand of love, I renounced it. "I said no," I replied, steel in every syllable. "And no will remain my answer." Adam exhaled sharply, jaw clenched. "Then you're unreasonable. If you refuse to sign, we might have to." Emily's glare cut him short before the word escaped. "Force." But the echo had already lodged in the walls. They departed soon after, their glossy propaganda abandoned on my table like spent ammunition. The door closed with a thud that reverberated in my bones. Alone, I stared at their brochures. Comfort that reeked of exile. Freedom repackaged as captivity. If they thought they could pen me into a corner, they had forgotten the man I am. That night, sleep fled me. I prowled the house, every creak of floorboards reminding me of labor long past, double shifts, aching spines, blueprints scribbled on napkins with Ellen by my side. Our sacrifices had built this sanctuary brick by brick, and now my children plotted to dismantle it in the name of caution. No. If they had chosen escalation, then escalation they would receive. The following day I sought Todd Fisher. He listened, his pen dancing across yellow legal paper as I poured the tale. "Mr. Hayes," he said at last, steady as a mountain, "they cannot force you unless a judge declares incompetence. And you, sir, are anything but incompetent." Relief washed over me, tempered by iron resolve. "Then let's forge it solid. No loopholes, no ambiguities." He nodded. "Power of attorney remains solely yours. We'll craft a will beyond dispute. If you wish, we can build a trust, untouchable until you decide." For the first time in weeks the ground steadied beneath me. That evening I placed Ellen's photo on the mantel, speaking into the quiet. "They've marked their line, love, now I'll etch mine." The house sighed, settling into calm. The clock resumed its measured pulse. Later the phone shrilled. Emily's number blinked on the screen. I let it ring, let the machine capture her words. "Dad, please call us. If you won't agree, we'll be forced to take the next step." I didn't answer. Instead, I poured dark coffee, sat in my chair, and let her threat seep into the silence. The next step, whatever that entailed, I was ready. Because escalation cuts both ways. And this time they weren't the only ones preparing for war. It arrived on a Tuesday dawn, hushed as drifting frost yet cutting like fractured crystal. I was cradling a mug of coffee, sunlight spilling shyly through the bay window when the sound came. Not the hurried rap of a courier, nor the genial rhythm of a neighbor, but a deliberate cadence. Weighty, commanding. At the threshold stood a man in a tailored suit, briefcase clasped. Behind him, Emily and Adam loomed like faint silhouettes. "Mr. Hayes?" he asked. "Yes, I am Daniel Rhodes, counsel in family law. Your children requested my presence for a conversation." The word conversation fell with the density of stone. I ushered them in. His leather soles tapped against the hardwood Ellen and I had once laid by hand, each echo feeling like trespass. Emily folded herself onto the sofa. Adam remained near the mantel, his eyes wandering yet again to Ellen's portrait. Rhodes snapped open the case. Documents, razor-aligned. He slid one toward me. "Mr. Hayes, your children are troubled about your welfare. They propose you appoint them durable power of attorney solely to safeguard your interests." There it was, spelled in stark ink, a threat cloaked in benevolence. My eyes burned over the text, not clouded by age but by indignation. Durable power of attorney, a tether masquerading as a kindness. Emily's voice turned velvety. "Dad, it's just so we can help with bills. With appointments, you won't have to carry the weight." Adam chimed, earnest veneer intact. "We only want to spare you hardship." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Hardship? I reared you in hardship. I scraped to fund your schooling. I hammered every beam of this house through hardship, and now you baptize it as frailty." Silence thickened. Even the clock seemed to pause. Rhodes cleared his throat. "Refusal could complicate matters later. Should anything happen," I leaned closer, "if anything befalls me, it shall unfold on my terms, not theirs." Adam flushed scarlet. "Dad, stop with the obstinacy. This is for your sake." My voice lashed. "No, it is for yours." Emily's eyes glossed with well-rehearsed sheen. "Why cast us as adversaries? We only want to love you." I shook my head. "Love does not arrive stapled to contracts." The lawyer gathered his pages, his professional mask never slipping. "Mr. Hayes, I'll leave these here. Reflect on them. But know this. Your children could pursue court action should concerns of competency arise." Competency. The syllables stung, though not as they intended. They knew nothing of the groundwork already laid, the will, the trust, the fortress built with Todd. Let them file. I was braced. When they left, the papers glared at me from the table. Pamphlets too, smiling strangers under counterfeit skies. I collected the lot, pamphlets, contracts, hollow assurances, and consigned them to the fireplace. Flames devoured their gloss, smiles blistered, threats dissolved into ash. As the smoke curled upward, I whispered to Ellen's portrait, "They fancy a battle in court. Let them. I have forged stronger cases than they dream. But their stratagem did not halt at legal papers. The next evening, Mrs. Patterson next door tapped gently, a plate of cookies in hand, worry etched across her brow. "Roy," she ventured, "your daughter came by, said you'd been muddled, forgetful. She asked if I'd noticed." Heat surged within me. "And your reply?" Her chin lifted firmly. "I told her you're sharper than most men half her age, but you ought to know." So, not content with documents, they now sowed whispers in the neighborhood, crafting a narrative. That night I sat in my recliner, notebook open. A line cleaved the page. There moved my counter. Lawyer's visit, right arrow, already shielded with Todd. Court petition, right arrow, secure medical evaluations. Rumor mongering, right arrow, rally allies, witnesses. The ledger calmed me. Fear melted into strategy. Next morning I sat with Dr. Levin, my physician of 2 decades. He chuckled after hearing my tale. "Roy, you're keener than most men who darken this office. I'll draft whatever attestations you need, and should it go to court, I'll stand there myself." Relief coursed through me, not merely relief, vindication, a living witness. Still, their escalation gnawed. That evening I wandered the rooms, hand grazing familiar edges, the counter Ellen adored, the bay window I had built, the old clock steady in its tick. I spoke aloud, to walls as much as to her frame. "They wager I'll crumble, but I've borne heavier yokes." The phone pierced the quiet. Adam this time, his tone clipped, fraying. "Dad, we noticed the papers unsigned. This isn't optional." A smile curled my lips. "Everything is optional, son, especially when it concerns me." A hissed curse, frustration leaking through. "You're courting disaster." "No," I replied. "I'm rectifying one." I ended the call before his answer. That night I felt no tremor of dread, only anticipation. For escalation always heralds climax. And if they wished to test me in court, under neighbors' gaze, with papers and poisoned rumors, then they were about to learn the steep price of underestimating their father. The dawn arrived spotless when the envelope appeared. Ivory paper, county crest impressed, its heft already whispering consequence. I drew Ellen's dove-shaped opener across the seam, steel whispering against paper. Inside lay the words I had anticipated, dreaded yet expected: petition for guardianship. So the veil had finally been lifted. My children no longer masked their intent with hushed tones or hesitant nudges. They had chosen to weaponize the law itself, conscripting the state as accomplice. I laid the parchment upon the kitchen table, the same oak where Emily once tipped her orange juice, where Adam stacked his castles of Lego. That familiar wood now bore the cold proclamation of betrayal. The court date arrived with merciless swiftness. That morning before the mirror, I stood clad in the suit Ellen favored most, dark, dignified, pressed. My shoes gleamed, my tie aligned, my thinning hair combed back with purpose. I whispered to the reflection, "We're ready." The courtroom radiated a chill deeper than mere air conditioning. It was the frigidity of judgment, benches in rows, fluorescent glare. A judge cloaked in black, gaze incisive and unsparing. Emily and Adam occupied one table, flanked by their polished advocate, their bodies stiff, their expressions rehearsed. Emily's lips compressed, Adam's jaw a locked hinge. I sat opposite with Todd Fisher beside me. His nod carried ballast, a steady anchor in hostile waters. The arguments began. Mr. Rhodes unfurled his performance, phrases of concern, insinuations of confusion, isolated incidents contorted into a tapestry of alleged decline. He sculpted me in words as fragile, faltering, tottering toward oblivion. Every syllable swung like a chisel against my dignity. Emily dabbed her lashes with a tissue. Adam's head shook gravely, pantomimes of sorrow staged for the gallery. To the unknowing eye, they resembled dutiful children grieving necessity. Then Todd rose. Measured, deliberate, he adjusted his glasses. "Your Honor, my client is not only competent, he is deliberate. I submit medical evaluations by Dr. Levin, Mr. Hayes's physician for 2 decades. I place before you notarized documents, his will, trust, directives, current, precise, unimpeachable." The clerk received the papers, every page a counterweight. Finally, Todd's voice softened but did not waver. "I ask that the court hear Mr. Hayes himself." I rose. My joints creaked but my spine did not bend. "Your Honor," I began, voice even, "I may be 68. I may misplace my spectacles from time to time, but I have not misplaced myself. I have built this life with these hands. I have raised my children through toil and scar, and today they stand demanding that I be stripped of worth, not because I have lost my faculties, but because I will not surrender my keys. Age is not incompetence. Affection is not contractual. And safety," I turned my gaze toward Emily and Adam, "is not a license to erase a man while his heart still beats." The silence that followed was cavernous. Even the fluorescent hum seemed to bow into stillness. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Hayes, do you comprehend the nature of this petition?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, "and I repudiate it with clarity, with dignity, with full consciousness of its implications." Todd's palm pressed steady upon my shoulder. The judge's decree rang out. "This court finds no evidence of incompetence. The petition for guardianship is hereby denied." Denied. A single syllable, yet it severed the weight pressing my chest. Emily's gasp fractured the hush. Adam muttered something venomous. Their counsel shuffled documents, lips pressed in defeat. I neither gloated nor smiled. I simply stood taller, reclaiming what had never been theirs to take, myself. Beyond the courthouse steps, Todd clasped my hand. "You carried that with grace, Roy." "Thank you," I answered. But this was never only about victory, it was about being heard. The autumn air tasted sharp, unshackled. For the first time in months I inhaled without heaviness. That evening I settled into Ellen's chair, the hearth alive with crackling flame. Her portrait above the mantel caught the firelight, her smile unwavering. "We did it," I murmured to her. "They tried to strip it away, but we endured." The house exhaled with me, walls easing their burden. I knew their hunger would return, greed circles like wolves. Yet I had stood, I had spoken, and I had prevailed. I was not finished. Not yet. And to you listening now, perhaps your family has dimmed your presence, perhaps age has been wielded as weapon against you. If so, remember this: you are mightier than their shallow reckonings. If these words resonated, I invite you to like, to subscribe for more, and to share your voice in the comments. I read them all, each testimony matters here. Thank you for lending your ears, your time, your spirit. This is not solely my account. It belongs to all who have defended their dignity when even kin sought to steal it.